Information sharing, the exchange of knowledge, experiences, and insights. It's the backbone of progress. In the domain of cybersecurity, information sharing is critical. Not only can it help us understand lessons learned from long careers and how to mature programs within our organizations, but information sharing is a critical component of understanding the increasingly complex and ever-changing threat landscape. The following is a conversation with Jerry Bell. Jerry is the CISO at IBM Cloud and the owner of the Infosec.Exchange Mastodon instance. We have a really good conversation about his experiences maintaining and just generally owning the Infosec.Exchange instance and his views on information sharing and community building. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Before we jump into the interview, I wanted to take a brief moment to thank everyone who's been so supportive of myself and the podcast, and I just want you to know that it means the world to me that you're listening. If you want to support the podcast, the best thing you can do is subscribe at infosecsidekick.com. It's free of charge, and it'll make sure that you never miss an episode. Now let's get into the interview with Jerry. All right. Hey, everyone. I'm here with Jerry Bell. Jerry was kind enough to join me here on the 5th episode of InfoSec Sidekick. Jerry, I wasn't quite sure how to introduce him. I hadn't met him until there was some commotion in the social media space, and there was a lot of talk about migrating to something called Mastodon, which I must admit I didn't know much about until that point. But Jerry plays an important role in that place, and I'm happy he's here. So Jerry, thank you so much for being here. Would you like to give, maybe just a little intro about your background and who you are?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having me on, and congratulations on your show here. So,
Thank you so much.
as you said, my name is Jerry Bell. I have been in the IT field for, I think this is my 32nd year, which is a long time. I've done quite a lot of different jobs in my career: network engineer, sysadmin, programming, management, help desk. Currently, I am the CISO for IBM Cloud, which is a pretty exciting and challenging job. And obviously, the reason we're here talking is I have been dabbling with Mastodon and other Fediverse applications now for quite some time, and things that have happened recently in Twitterland have made that a lot more exciting.
That's crazy. Yeah, I certainly want to talk about the Mastodon and Infosec.Exchange, but I fear maybe all the conversations you've had since that point are on that exact topic. I don't know if that's true or not. So I also wanted to touch a little bit on information sharing and networking within cybersecurity and just kind of the importance of that, right? It's a huge part of who we are as human beings to want to engage with others, and the technology we choose to do that is obviously critical. And man, that's crazy. 32 years. Did you see yourself being the CISO at IBM when you first started?
No, so it's interesting. I started working out of high school as a maintenance person at a really small company. This was back in the very early 90s, kind of before the big PC boom. And the person who ran their computers at the time, they were a Motorola Unix shop, was his dad was the owner of the company, and he was in the process of taking over, and so they saw an opportunity and asked me to take over some of his duties, and that was kind of my entry into IT. And I worked there for a couple of years and went to an ISP in the late 90s, which was a pretty interesting time to be in the internet business. Not really focused on security at all. I that ISP ended up getting bought by a company called Internet Security Systems. And Internet Security Systems, as the name might imply, they were in the security space. I had been more at that point more on a CIO trajectory. I worked up the ranks there and basically was kind of in line to be the CIO when IBM acquired ISS in 2006. And an interesting thing happens when you're acquired like that. You tend to get branded by the place that you come from, and so I was branded as the security person because I came from internet security systems, and I've never candidly fancied myself as a big person or big company person, but it has been such an interesting ride, and IBM is such a good company that I'm still here. Gosh, 17 years later. And
Wow,
to answer your question, no, I never did, but here I am.
that's great, man. Yeah. Uh, what this is totally a tangent, but it made me curious as someone who at least looks up to the CISO position as something like as a possibility in the future. What's the difference between a CIO and a CISO trajectory? Is it kind of obvious, right? Like you're very focused on security versus adjacently focused, or I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
Well, it's a great question, and I don't think there's one answer that applies universally. But in general, I would say the difference is that a CIO is responsible for um, how technology enables the business. So how how you process your accounting and payroll and all of those kind of back office things, as well as the things that make your business, you know, different and special relative to your peers. Whereas the CISO is really responsible for kind of dovetailing on that strategy, but working with the CIO to figure out how to how to not end up in the news or have your CEO or yourself testifying in front of Congress. It's a challenging job in its own right. There's an infinite array of different technologies that can be themselves combined in an infinite array of ways, and we have to make sure that we're doing it in a responsible way.
Yeah, I like that answer. I think it sounds like I could be off base here, but the CIO has so much to worry about. Over time, there became this need for something called a CISO because, you know, it's such an important thing, like you said, to keep people out of the news and things that it just made a lot of sense to have an executive position kind of focused on that to help our CEOs, our CIOs avoid those kind of doomsday scenarios. Yeah, super big tangent. Totally not a question we had prepped for, but I appreciate you answering it. Uh, so from there, I wanted to jump into um, information sharing within cybersecurity. What is your background like interfacing with the information sharing community? Do you have like a position on it? What are your kind of pros and cons? Just thoughts around how information sharing within cybersecurity, plays a role.
Oh my goodness, this is a 4 hour long conversation. Um, it is it's a very complicated topic because it has multiple levels to it, right? There's intelligence as a service that a lot of companies consume, and then there's the friendier, you know person to person connections that we build between practitioners and share information, and they all have their own pros and cons. I think it's critically important that we do it. I don't think in general we do it well as an industry. I think that there's been a lot of runs at making it more effective with governments trying to foster that. But I've I think a lot of us have been in those public-private partnership intelligence sharing sessions, and it's basically a bunch of people just breathing into the phone, not wanting to say anything. And that's a that's a challenging it's a challenging situation because candidly a lot of the types of things that we as security professionals deal with are highly confidential, and
Yeah.
so it's not a trivial matter just to to make a proclamation that you've been either are under attack or have been attacked by some adversary, and providing uh, IOCs. That's a really difficult. Uh, Solving that problem, I think, is going to become more important as we go forward. But today, I think we're focused still a lot more on tactics rather than on um, actual actors because of that.
Right. Have you seen an example of an effective information sharing platform within cybersecurity? Like, I mean, it can be Mastodon, it can be Twitter. I doubt maybe your answer will be that. One of the things that jumps into my mind is like an ISAC. They tend to do a decent job at like anonymizing some of the information sharing there, but still, I notice it's just it's just an extra step people a lot of times aren't willing to add to their busy day.
Yeah, I like there's a bunch of different ISACs, and they're not all created equal.
Hmm.
And so some of them I've seen work pretty effectively, and but most of them I think are um, thinly veneered opportunities to advertise. Uh, I
Yeah.
don't know how better to say it than that. You know, there's again, it's a complicated question from a from a at scale consumption of threat intelligence. There's a lot of good companies out there that do a pretty good job. The trick has always been how to take the fire hose and peel off the little bit of stuff that's relevant to you. Um, I think that's a big challenge. The thing, go if I go back to like the interpersonal connections on Twitter, for a long time, for many years, there were quite a few pretty effective. I guess I'll call them threat intelligence sharing private groups,
Hmm.
and I think some of those have moved into Telegram. I think some of them have stayed on Twitter. I think there's a lot of hesitation about using Mastodon for that because of the some of the lack. I don't want to call it lack of privacy, but because of some of the challenges with isolating communications away from public view. I I think there's been in very recent, like is in the past couple of months, a big move of some of those communities, the tight knit communities, into Signal.
Hmm. Yeah. So, I was going to ask, I guess, like, does social media play a role in information sharing? But it sounds like the answer is obviously yes, in some way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's effective or ineffective or somewhere on the, spectrum in between there, largely depends on the day, the people who are involved, the people you know. Um, and I find that latter part, right? The people you know thing, that that is a tough one for me because it's really hard to like break into. Um, do you see a lot of exclusivity in the information sharing space? I mean, like, what would how would you recommend someone break into being part of this group?
That is a fantastic question, and you're spot on. Um, in the past, I have been I've been a member of these several of these loosely affiliated groups where they've been inhabited by response people from companies like Mandiant and pen testing firms like Coalfire and others. And it's personally served me very well because you tend to find the things that are meaningful. Like you actually get a heads up on things that matter rather than just, oh gosh, another CVSS 10.0 was released. You get some context about what's actually being attacked. I will say I don't know that there's a great, like I don't have a manual on on how to get into those communities because they tend to form organically between people, and it's based on trust. Because if you're a person working in incident response for a company, and you've now worked on your second or third response of the same kind of thing, and you don't want to communicate that to people you are concerned might say, hey, Joe said that he was working on responding to this ransomware incident, and then suddenly people are trying to speculate what company was impacted, and on and on. So it's that, I think it's that trust factor, and and really having access to a, a range of people in different positions,
Mhm.
and building those communities.
Yeah, it's almost like gosh, I'm horrible with words. Hopefully, this is the right word, but like an oxymoron in a way. In order to get into the group, you have to first just be a part of the group.
Yeah.
Um, where I think this is a really great pivot into the Infosec.Exchange because when we'll get a little bit into like what is the Fediverse and just at a very high level and what Infosec.Exchange is and Mastodon is, but I want to just recall when I joined the Infosec.Exchange, it was very different and almost like I felt like I almost instantly had access to people that I didn't have access to on Twitter in a way because probably partially because it was exciting and new, so people were trying to engage with the favoriting and the boosting a lot more frequently. But I found myself almost like, I mean, even this conversation, it's very, very weird. Like you are the alpaca, right? Like that was just, I saw Jerry, alpaca. I think I asked you on Mastodon, like, hey, what's the thing about the alpaca? And you responded to me, and I was like, I just feel like this would never have happened on Twitter. I don't know why I feel this way, but it felt like I was just, being a part of like a little bit more of a side culture, and it was definitely just more focused, and you knew if you were a member of this, you were paying attention to something, and you know that made you almost, maybe it is that trust meter, right? Like maybe you just started baseline +1 +2 trust because you were there.
Right.
Um, I wonder if you have any thoughts around that.
So it is also interesting. I started Infosec.Exchange. I mean, it was part hobby, part I felt strongly about building a community. Um, for many years it was much smaller. It was a lot smaller until Twitter melted down. But certainly, my observation was in the days after the great meltdown, there were a lot of people trying to um, reestablish networks, create new networks, and Mastodon is in the Fediverse itself is a much smaller, like two orders of magnitude smaller environment than Twitter, and and another order of magnitude smaller than something like Facebook. Um, and it's just a much tighter knit community. Like there isn't an infinite number of people that are going to come along and make comments. And so I found that the sense of community and sense of belonging has been much stronger than my time on Twitter. Not that, by the way, I had a lot of great time on Twitter. I had made a ton of great contacts and met a lot of good people there. But the people on Mastodon I found are that might sound corny, right? But they're a lot more genuine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost something you have to be on Mastodon to understand that comment. But it feels that way for sure. I don't know. It's definitely different to get used to even the UI of it, but I
Hmm.
can't help but wonder if the way the UI works almost propels it to be a little bit more personal. And I just think there's a lot to explore there. We probably, you and I maybe aren't like UX people that want to have that conversation, but I'm sure there's something to that. Um, what is the Fediverse?
So the Fediverse is it's a decentralized network that uses a common protocol to exchange messages. It for the preponderance of people who have exposure to the Fediverse is through Mastodon, but Mastodon isn't the only bit of software that participates. Mastodon and there's a number of other software like it, like Acoma and Pleroma and Calkey and Miskey and a couple of others, and they all have very similar. I call them Twitter-like, right? They have similar capabilities in terms of sharing short messages. It's a micro blogging platform, but it is different from something like Twitter in that everybody's on, well, not everybody, right, but many people are on different servers, and so it's in some ways a blending of the concept of email with the concept of Twitter, where some people are on Gmail and some people are on Outlook.com, and some people have their own vanity domain, and some people are on you know a myriad of different instances, and they can all communicate with each other just like you can with email. And so it is, um, again, it's very Twitter-like. You can post messages, you can respond, you can post pictures and videos and like and boost and whatnot. But at the same time, there are some marked differences that that has. I think it created some friction for people who moved over in the early days. Not everybody that moved stayed. There were
Right.
quite a few people that came over and just didn't like the experience. And this part of that is the UI, and part of it is culture.
Hmm. What is the allure of the Fediverse and Mastodon from a social media perspective? I know we talked about, well, you had also alluded to like the trust factor and some people, especially in the security space, potentially not feeling comfortable with like the total openness and nature of that. And I truly don't understand it enough to even make that comment. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, um, you know, why the Fediverse should be considered as this kind of communication platform. Like, what are the things that drew you to it initially and continue to kind of draw you to it?
Um, Gosh, such a good question. um, the initial draw, I'm just going to be very frank and say I like to tinker, and but once I got in there, it really drew me in, and I saw the promise of it, and so it, I guess, to some extent became a bit of a hobby that has since run amok, I guess. Um,
An expensive hobby?
an expensive, yeah, very expensive hobby. Uh, it's different than I'll give you some examples. When I was on Twitter, I still have a Twitter account, which I primarily use it to provide technical support to people who got locked out of their Mastodon accounts. Um,
Surprised you didn't get banned yet.
I, trying to keep a low profile, but it probably will happen sooner or later. Um, no, I found in Twitter a lot of instances where people were just being awful to each other or awful to me, and you'll report them, and the inevitable response back is there's nothing actionable here,
Right.
right? And so one of the one of the things that I think a lot of people, including me, and I think a lot of people who are on our instance and other instances in the Fediverse like, is that kind of local control. So each instance gets to define their own acceptable use terms. And there's a bit of gamification. If you've been around on the Fediverse for a while, you'll quickly learn that not every instance holds the same values.
Hmm.
And so what ends up happening is, there's pockets of instances on the Fediverse that don't really associate with each other. As an example, and it's pretty controversial, but there's a movement of free speech instances, and while that might sound like tautologically a good thing, it typically means uncensored. You you can say whatever you want to whoever you want, and you're not going to be censored. And so that tends to uh, attract people who just want to troll and not kind of be awful people. And
Right.
a lot of the Fediverse tends to block those sites. And even our own instance, Infosec.Exchange, there was a pretty high profile flap back in the November timeframe when the head of the Department of Homeland Security's CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Administration, created an account. And the fact that I didn't block them was wildly unpopular, because
Hmm.
there's quite a few anarchists on the Fediverse. There's quite a few instance operators who are anarchists, and just find it reprehensible that that we would allow a member of that government agency to have an account, under the misunderstanding that it was going to enable some kind of surveillance or
Hmm.
what have you, which is really not not a real concern in my mind. Um, as a result of that, some instances even blocked us, right? Because we just didn't share the same values.
Hmm. So there's this concept in the Fediverse where you, as a server owner, can choose which other servers to associate with, right?
Yeah, yes. Although I would say it differently. By default, everything will associate with everything else, and unless you take actions to turn it from a blacklist to an allow list, it's more of a situation where you're identifying instances that you don't want to interact with.
Hmm. Okay, I got it. So, really quick aside, if anyone's interested in saying, oh, this, and they don't happen to know what Infosec.Exchange is, you simply just go to Infosec.Exchange and you can sign up, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Super
Um,
super easy.
there you go. Um, okay, great. So this has been an awesome conversation so far. I want to be respectful of your time, and I feel like I still have a lot of questions to ask you. So I'd love to talk about like specifically the influx of users to the Infosec.Exchange server. The catalyst of this, of course, being, there was this uncertainty about Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter going through. A lot of people had concerns about if that did happen, what would the platform turn into, and a lot of stuff around there. Ultimately, as we all know, that did go through, and there was I forget what you called it just a few minutes ago, but a mass migration. Let's just say people were very upset. It was high emotion, and people were just looking for what was out there. And personally, I think the name of the instance itself was almost like 95% of the reason people chose to go to Infosec.Exchange. When I heard it, I was like, wait, this is literally Infosec information exchange. That sounds like a place I should go. And the funny thing is like I never even posted on Twitter. Like I wasn't even really a Twitter user, which is another interesting thing, right? There were the people who used Twitter religiously, and then there were people like me who like had an account and posted emo lyrics when I was like 14 and then never used it again, right? And then Infosec.Exchange happened, or I saw the word and then it made sense, and I saw other people going there, and I felt like, oh wow, I can be, far from the OG people, right? But it felt like I was going to be part of this thing. Like I'm going to get in there early. I'm going to participate, and it was fun. It was really fun. Um, can you tell me a little bit about your experience during this time? Did you feel like a celebrity? Like, was it just like you looked at your, I don't know the infrastructure, but like, did you look at your AWS bill one day and you're like, oh my God, what am I getting myself into?
It was it's fascinating. So I set up the instance back in 2017, and it for most of its life until probably March of 2022, it had 2 or 300 users. You know, so it was very small, and it was something that I would poke my head in and take a look at, maybe once or twice a week, because it was just really slow. It was, I had made friends there, and it was a very very asynchronous messaging platform. Like, you would just post and get back to it when you could. Twitter was still my drug of choice at the time, and so I had a alert on my phone when I get DMs or message mentions. And I was actually working here. I'm at my beach place right now, and sitting in the same spot, in fact, on a work call, and my phone started going crazy, and I really didn't know why. Actually,
Hopefully
you know
it's
what?
not a breach.
I've got to I've got to rewind a little bit. Back in April of 2022, up until that point, I had been hosting the instance on a VPS. Like, it cost me maybe $500 a year. Just something I paid for, not a big deal. In in April, I think it was April, Elon Musk announced that he was going to buy Twitter, and that caused a bunch of people to move over at the time, and it was not more than maybe 1,000. But it was
First migration.
but it was enough to cause my VPS to be, basically unusable, and so I ended up having to swallow hard and rent a real server. And at the time, it was a pretty significant server that I rented from Hetzner in Germany, and so like $120 a month. It was so quite a big step, going from $400 or $500 a year to $1,500 a year.
Yeah.
But I figured, hey, you know what? I'm never gonna have to, like, this is never I'm never gonna outgrow this thing.
Oh,
And
the
so
naivety.
so fast forward to, I think it was October 26th of 2022. I was sitting here, and my phone starts going nuts, and I see people just tagging me saying, "Hey, we're all going to Jerry's Mastodon instance," and they gave the address, and over the next several days, it just continued and continued. I actually never posted anything about it. Um, and so on the instance, I saw it. It went from 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 to 4,000. after I think the first weekend we were about 10,000. So it went from a thousand ish to 10,000 in the course of a weekend. Server was fine. Over the course of the next week, growth continued. We got up to about 15,000 and things started not going so well.
Yeah.
And so when you ask the question, did I feel like a celebrity? The answer is I didn't have time to feel like a celebrity. I was doing everything I could. I don't think I slept from probably the first week in November until like mid-December because I wasn't working. I was trying to juggle and refactor the infrastructure to handle the growth. We peaked out at about uh, 50,000 users with about 22,000 concurrent people on at a given time,
Wow.
which is a lot, and gives me, by the way, a lot of respect for a company like Twitter who has 100 times that. And so I ended up having server bills into the into the thousands,
Wow.
and actually still do. Um, the instance has, I believe, 12 pretty significant servers plus a CDN
Hmm.
powering it. And part of that, by the way, is that we've as we've like to think as we've become more prominent and popular, we're becoming more the subject of attacks and whatnot. And so we've been subject of several application layer DDoS attacks and DNS attacks and whatnot. So um, my goal all along has been to create a space for security people to come in and build a community and just kind of facilitate that community and make sure they had you know a reliable landing spot. I, by the way, am under no misconceptions that once people get in here, they may choose to move to a different instance or move to their own instance, and that's okay, right? That's actually I encourage that, and it's happened quite a bit. It is not about like I don't have investors looking to see how many what my user growth was
Yeah.
or my click rates were or anything like that. It's all to me. It's all about is the platform useful to the people who are using it. That's it.
Yeah. I have a couple questions on this. When when you hit that 15,000 user mark and the realization came that I'm going to have to beef up this infrastructure. I wonder if like what was the pushing point? I mean, I know you already said you wanted to build a community, right? And clearly it was squarely on your shoulders for this particular movement, so-called movement of people who had found this Infosec.Exchange. It was probably clear that more people were going to find this, and if if this were to be people's entry into the Fediverse, and like you mentioned, they could go other places, but this was clearly like I had mentioned before, the name was just perfect. It was catching people's attention. I wonder, what was it your fact like the fact that you wanted to build a community that kind of pushed you to make that jump? I I'm just imagining myself in that situation where there would be a lot going through my mind of like, I'm about to sign a contract to up this server. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just trying to understand how that moment was for you. Was it also in this exact same spot? How did that play out in your head, and what ultimately made you?
So it wasn't a singular moment. It was the temperature turning up, right? It was we hit 15,000 users, and suddenly the sidekick queues were just jammed and weren't processing anything anymore. And so, okay, I got to go scale that up. Okay, so I rented another server just for that, and then suddenly the database server, and so then I I bought a bigger server for that, and it happened incrementally over the course of about 5 weeks. And then, at the end of the month, I think I had my first bill was about $4,000 from um, from Hetzner, and but it wasn't like I sat down and engineered this grand architecture. It was like I was just trying to keep the site afloat. And
Yeah. Have you scaled back since that time?
I have scaled back and up and back and up and back again. Um, so the answer is yes. I In the early days, I was running on a, a pretty good number of sizable systems like the AMD EPIC 64 core systems, and those were important when we had the 22,000 concurrent users. Now we're in the 1,500 concurrent users, so it needs a lot less horsepower, but I still care a lot about the availability. And
Hmm.
so what I've done is I've scaled back the size of each of the nodes. So now I'm using more, I would say using more servers that are smaller.
Got it. Yeah, man. I mean, I know it's not Twitter scale, but you really are running a mini company in a way. I mean, it's the infrastructure of a small business um, for this, and I can imagine that's been a fascinating learning experience. Maybe a callback to your earlier days in tech, and maybe it's why you keep doing it. To keep those skills sharp.
It is, it really is. The tool that I use most at work is PowerPoint. And
Fun.
I have a team of 200 people, and I don't touch technology anymore. I mean, I have to make consequential decisions about technology, but I don't go hands on anymore. And so um, it's been fun for me because of that. Like I really love technology. I really love getting in there and trying to solve some problems. Like right now, my current goal that I've set for myself is I want to create a geographically diverse entry points for Infosec.Exchange. Right now, other than the CDN, which is like the media, images and
Hmm.
JavaScript and whatnot, everything has to go back to the servers in Germany. And kind of painful as they sit here in Florida. The
Yeah.
site can take some time to load sometimes, and so right now I'm trying to figure out, well, how do I have uh, multi-master replicated databases in across multiple continents,
Hmm.
so that I can make it more the user experience better, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, super fascinating. And I think it's kind of cool to know that this is all happening as, we sit on the instance posting memes and things. Yeah, that's crazy, man. Well, I want to, like I keep saying, I want to be respectful of your time, but I did want to really quick hit on some practical advice for people. If you have any, just,
Sure.
since you've been using this for, I think since you said 2017 ish, um, it could be very difficult when you first log into infosec.exchange, and there are things that you'll see and you'll try posting and you'll wonder who sees this, what, like, there's just so many questions because it is Twitter like you had mentioned, but it's not Twitter. Absolutely, it's not Twitter. It's not Facebook. It's not like anything. Well, I contradicted myself there. It is like stuff, but it's just not them. So it can leave you, or I mean, I'm speaking from personal experience here, can leave you a little bit lost, right? Um, what are some of the things you've done over the years to enhance your feed, to focus what you're seeing, to make sure people are seeing your posts? Like, I guess just the basics of Infosec.Exchange 101, how to make it fun, how to make it useful.
Um, it is, as you said, it's different than Twitter in one very important way, and that is there is no algorithms. And so in Twitter and Facebook, your the popularity of your post, and it's kind of a complicated thing, right? But the popularity of your post determines how popular your post is going to
Right.
be and how many people get to see it. And that's really not how it works in the Fediverse. It's completely ruthlessly chronological, and you other than the people who are on your own instance or who follow you, um, people don't get to see your content by default. And so a couple of things I have done in on the instance is I've taken steps to improve the quality of our search capability so that you can actually search for terms and get real results. I would say you need to learn how to use hashtags, which is a very like mid 2000s kind of a concept, but um, it's very necessary to both find content and also to help people find you. Um, I would say, look, first do an introduction, right? Tell the world what you're about, what you like, um, and use hashtags, and then you know find someone who is posting something interesting. Take a look at who they follow and who they're commenting on, and pretty quickly you can establish a network of people who share your interests.
Hmm.
And that's I would say that's my best advice is looking for people who are posting things that interest you, and then looking at who they're engaging with to find additional people who would be interesting to you.
Got it. So, as a general rule of thumb, I mean, I think social media is notorious for the algorithms, and there's a lot of conversation now about the negative effects of an algorithm on someone's mental status, right? Of, I'm going to post this, and if it doesn't get 10, 100, 2,000 likes, it could ruin people's day. Um, when I or when a listener goes to infosec.exchange, it sounds like that's just not something you should ever be thinking about for multiple reasons. One, it's bad for your mental health. Two, there's no algorithm to boost this. Like,
Correct.
so it sounds to me like, the opportunity is there to use something like infosec.exchange to really heal your mind from that algorithmic thinking, build a true community, and interact with people, not an algorithm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating. I've jumped back into Twitter a couple of times. Again, usually it's typically to help people who are having problems with infosec.exchange. But inevitably, I end up on the discovery tab in Twitter, and it is something that I've noticed. Twitter intentionally shows me things that I think it knows I won't like,
Hmm.
and and I and I think that's um, I don't mean to be conspiratorial or anything like that, but I really think that's how they are trying to drive engagement. Is I think they found it's kind of like the Monsters Inc. They they found
I
they
love this
found
analogy.
they found that um, you know showing people happy things doesn't charge their batteries, but showing them things they don't like will cause them to scroll more and comment more, and we'll get more ads. I think it's that, by the way, which is having, at least in part, a negative impact on people's mental health. Um, and as you said, it is very difficult to go viral on the Fediverse. It's not impossible, by the way. Like, you can have posts that will have thousands of posts and likes, and but those tend to be few and far between, right? They're
Yeah.
things that are generally mass, popular to the masses, and they typically happen. They, you don't have long running things, I guess.
Yeah.
They will gain a lot of attention, and then they'll fade out. You don't see, um, intentionally so, like the big pylons, where somebody will say something and attract negative attention, and you can actually see it happening. You can see people trying to start that on the Fediverse, where they will, they'll try to whip up a frenzy of anger, and it just falls flat because there isn't that algorithmic, function trying to show that to people.
Right. Yeah. So I told you I'd be respectful of your time. We're going to call it here. Um, so to leave everyone with this thought about Monsters Inc., which I think is very important, um, Jerry is hosting the laughing version of generating energy, whereas Twitter is hosting the
Scary.
making you scared. I constantly see fight videos. I don't know what that's saying about my personal habits, but it is very disturbing. I don't see any of that on Infosec.Exchange. Makes my day a little better. Beautiful thing. Jerry, I want to thank you so much for joining me. Especially, it is a weekend, and I was kind of looking for a guest to fill my schedule for the Monday episode. So I really can't thank you enough. I did want to give you a chance to maybe plug anything that you're looking to plug. I know, especially Infosec.Exchange is an expensive hobby. There's a lot of people that use it. If there's any way we can support you in that endeavor, or if there's anything else you'd like to plug.
Thank you for that. It is an expensive hobby, and I'm very fortunate to have, donors that help defray, at least some of the costs. You can support the instance, on our we have Patreon, Ko-fi, and LibrePay. The links to those are in my pinned profile. But I think if you go to patreon.com/infosec exchange, that's probably the simplest place to support it. Certainly appreciate any and all support. Mastodon, by the way, is just one of the services that we run now. I run, a whole host of different Fediverse services, from, an equivalent to Goodreads to an equivalent to Reddit, and many other things too. And they're all expensive, and they're at different stages in their maturity. But I like to think it's a better, more sane place, and I really hope that everybody finds it, beneficial and helpful personally and in their careers. So, again, I really appreciate you inviting me here to talk about this stuff, and it was great meeting you.
Awesome. Great meeting you too, Jerry. Hope you have a good time at the beach, and hopefully we'll have you back on the podcast at some point in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.